GD here, and as you can see, we are back once again. And I thought, since F1 24 is being released very soon, why not rank some of the most recent F1 games by Codemasters, more specifically on the latest games on the latest game engine, which will mean from F1 2015 onwards. So as I decide to describe the games going through this video, I will be giving my rankings at the end. Please let me know your thoughts down below. Which game has been your favourite and which game has been your most disappointing? And you can say that for any F1 game that Codemasters has produced. So aside from F1 2015, believe it or not, the basis of the current game and soon to be the F1 24 game we're playing is still using this platform, game engine, and it actually is the same game from F1 2015. It is pretty much being updated year upon year. And if you actually go and look into the game files on PC, you'll even see some code from F1 2015 which is still in the F1 23 game, which for me is just absolutely baffling. And I don't think it's any secret, but sadly pretty much every F1 game we've had from since 2015 has just been a mere update from year upon year, mostly with delivery, sound, music and graphics, and then just tweaks to the handling to actually make it appear more new than it actually is. In terms of 2015, I just don't think this was really a very good game. I remember this was the first game on the updated game engine. That meant that many features were not available, even things such as the career mode. You couldn't even play career mode on this game. You had a championship mode, and then you had something called Pro Season, which was basically the same thing, but with no assists, cockpit, and 100% races. The online was very simple, so there wasn't really actually too much to do on this game. And I remember when I was league racing back in the day, many of the most competitive leagues at the time, we actually reverted back to playing F1 2013. That's how bad it was. So not just the features, but just the drivability, the handling was not enjoyable. And I understand that this isn't a sim, but it just felt extremely arcadey. So yeah, this is something I will but definitely won't be playing ever again. As we move on to F1 2016, in a nutshell, this was extremely similar to F1 2015. However, because of the backlash of F1 2015, they reintroduced a career mode. This time they introduced a new R&D system, the R&D tree. That was the first time we saw it. That was actually quite welcome for many people. They also introduced the practice programs, and they gave you a bit more of a paddock feel when you were playing the career mode, so a bit more of 2010 vibes, which again is crazy to me that it's taken them that long to give that level of immersion again. This is also the first game that featured manual start, so this was something a bit different. But overall, it felt very similar to F1 2015 in terms of its handling, extremely arcadey, but now it just has a career mode, more game modes to play, and what I felt F1 2015 really should have had in the first place on launch. So I think this will definitely be another one of those games that I will not be playing again. If you move into F1 2017, surprisingly, this was a big boost compared to 2016. The career mode was improved with much more detail, but one of the biggest things is that this was the introduction of classic cars, and I have to say this is something I'm still missing to this day. The classic cars felt absolutely amazing to drive, and actually sometimes, or most of the time, felt even better than the official cars. The handling itself definitely felt more refined. The contact model was good, the slipstreaming and the racing was actually quite enjoyable. So overall, I think this was a big improvement on F1 2015, 2016. So I'd actually say this was actually a good addition in the series. F1 2018, I think for me personally, and this is just my opinion, from what I've seen online, I feel this is an extremely underrated game and doesn't really get the credit it deserves. In my opinion, the graphics were noticeably a big improvement. We had a third classic car tier introduced, and overall I just felt it was so much fun to drive. The career mode had a longevity value added to it, making the player have to manage the car much more. But if you know me, been watching my channel for a while, I'm not really a big career mode player, so that's not the reason why I'm playing these F1 games. So the biggest thing for me was by far the handling and ERS management, along with the tyre management as well. Such as with F1 24, which we have seen, you have the ability to change your ERS multiple times throughout the lap with many different modes. The handling itself, I think the need of how you had to manage your tyre temperatures, so you had to run very oversteery setups, very responsive setups, but you had to be ultra smooth with your driving. So I think it really rewarded the naturally smooth drivers. So even if you were incredibly fast over a lap, especially like in a time trial, you couldn't get away with driving that same way. Throughout the race, you could be very fast for the first 3 to 5 laps of the race. I remember racing in Singapore in this game in a league race. You could be driving almost a second a lap faster than what you were doing, but then if you drove that fast, your tyres would just simply be falling off the cliff. So you actually had to purposely drive slower, more smoothly, conserve your tyre temperatures, your tyre wear, and then throughout the race, that would be rewarding you so much more. I haven't really played an F1 game where it actually felt like you were driving an F1 car in terms of its management. So I think just the satisfying nature of the handling, managing of the tyres, the tyre temperatures, I think this is one of the most fun handling-wise games that I've actually ever played. This made the racing really enjoyable. 2 stops were very common in league racing, giving a further dynamic. I think for me, this will be one of my all-time favourite F1 games and sure ranks in the top tier. F1 2019, this felt quite similar to F1 2018, but just wasn't really quite as enjoyable for me. I think F2 being introduced was a big feature, and it did feel very good to drive, with some additions of more classic cars, driver transfers in career mode, plus race replays. Overall, the handling felt like a little bit of a step back in terms of its enjoyment and drivability for me, and although I would say it was good, I wouldn't say it was a particularly memorable game. F1 2020, I know many people have said that they feel that this is actually the best F1 game that's been made, and I think it's certainly in the conversation. I remember playing this game so much, and I had some absolutely incredible memories. Career mode wise, it was vastly improved with the introduction of my team, but again, I don't really play these games for the career. The handling just felt incredibly satisfying, and I think the best way for me to describe it, it just felt extremely balanced. The traction, the braking, the skill gap between drivers, the difference between assists, without assists, the on and off track effects, the ERS, DRS, slipstream balance, it all just felt very on point. The classic cars, in my opinion, felt the best it has ever been throughout an F1 game, and I think the way to describe it again is that this was probably the most complete current F1 game on the current game engine that Codemasters have produced. So I would say it was certainly top tier for me, and really depending on my mood, it's a swing between F1 2020 and 2018. I think they were both almost just as good as each other. F1 2021, the graphics in this game were really good, but the career my team development was certainly lacking. They focused on Breaking Point, the story mode, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, to create a bit of an excitement before the release, but I felt like the hype for this was quickly faded, as it really take long to complete. Not to mention the AI was just incredibly OP in this game. But I think one of the things I remember the most from this is just that the amount of bugs was pretty much at an all-time high. A decent addition, but I think again, one that I haven't remembered for some time. And if I do remember it, I don't remember it for good reasons. F1 2022, my oh my, where do I even start with this one? Even though F1 2015 and 2016 were terrible for the handling models, mainly really for being too arcadey, this for me, being the year 2022, I think is by far the most disappointing handling model that I've ever played on a racing game, period. Specifically, the traction was just the most inconsistent and unnatural that I've ever played. It felt like you could lose the car almost at any point, If you did the same thing lap upon lap, you'd be losing the car. I even saw F1 Esport drivers losing the car and qualifying under traction. So it just felt the drivability was at an all-time low. Unlike F1 2020, every aspect of this game, from its handling, the contact model, damage model, ERS, DRS, slipstream, dirty air, just all felt wrong and just not balanced at all. It continued the trend of bugs and wheels failing to calibrate work properly from F1 2021, and honestly, this made it one of the most least enjoyable F1 games I've ever played. It just didn't feel complete for me, and that the limit of updating the same game from F1 2015 was now taking its toll. Games such as 2017, 18 and 20, they did somewhat feel like actually vastly different games from the previous, although it's still off the same platform, still off the same game engine. But these games here, 2022, the code could no longer really be supporting the weight of how much it has been added to over the years. So yeah, I think it was taking its toll on this game. I uninstalled it very quickly and I will never be playing this game again. F1 23, many people hype this game, and I can certainly understand why. The handling felt so much better to F1 22. When I first played this game, I really enjoyed it, and it still has been enjoyable to this day. It felt much more refined, much more natural. But one thing I will say is that I think the feeling is strongly linked to how bad F1 22 is, since that was such a train wreck of a game. With this redefined handling model feeling much more supposed of how it should have felt, I think it just felt a bit better than it actually is. So it still is very much like the same game from F1 22, but really simply with a better handling model. The career mode is not immersive, that hasn't changed for a long time. Other aspects of the game, it just doesn't really feel involved, improved. And the way I sum up this game, hate to say it, it just feels a little bit boring to play. I haven't really felt that excited to play it. It's a tolerable one for me, but again, something I probably won't be in a rush to play again in the future. And if I was to give some special mentions to games that weren't on this game engine, I think F1 2006 Champion Edition, that felt almost one of the most immersive F1 games I've actually played, far more immersive than any game that we have had in the past 10 years. Also things such as 2010, I think the paddock feel from that as well. The sense of speed felt absolutely incredible in that game. And games such as F1 2012, I remember there was actually a feature on there with the game where it went from wet to dry. You had to stay within a dry line, and why don't we have that now? That would be so enjoyable. You really felt the weight of the car. Yes, the handling was quite arcadey, but the racing was incredible. The balance of the game was great. That weather feature, it just felt like you were so much more connected to the car. And then 2013, I think, will be one of my favourite F1 games. Might be a bit biased towards that because that's when I really started to become competitive, but I think that game just felt like a game you looked forward to playing. Jumping online, you had the sprint mode factor, the ERS, you felt connected to the car, you could actually manage your tyres as well. It was just a very enjoyable game to play. But as you can see here, here's my rankings of the recent F1 games in the current game engine. Please let me know what you think. What is your list? If you had to give a list of 10, where would you be ranking first? Where would you be ranking 10th? I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be catching you very soon. Peace.